Greetings and welcome back. No, not welcome back. Welcome to the brand new series, StarduskLP Rants. A complete series with all the rantiness of a ranty ranter. No, just kidding. This isn't a series, but this is me kind of ranting. Now, as some of you know, I've been doing my Let's Play of Mass Effect and returning slowly to the Mass Effect universe, the single player, at least after a long hiatus, partly dwelling in Skyrim, and prior to that, partly in a multiplayer, Mass Effect multiplayer, which is where I spent most of my time with the final installment of Mass Effect 3. But, I've been reprising certain things, looking through certain things, sifting through lore, and, getting back into the Mass Effect universe. And I have to ask the question, why is Mac Walter still on the team? Why is he the head writer? Why is he the lead writer of the? Not just why was he not the lead, why was he the lead writer of Mass Effect 3? Why is he the lead writer of the coming Mass Effect title? Look, I don't want to spend the time going through all the plot holes and problems. There were many, many problems. Those of you who might not know him, in case you're interested, check out Smudboy. I'll post a link in the box. He did some excellent analyses of the problems with Mass Effect 3, as well as Mass Effect 2. Although I'm only kind of halfway on board with him on Mass Effect 2, but I'm mostly on board with him on Mass Effect 3. And he does a very good job. So he did a great job of that. Check that out if you really want to get to the nitty-gritty. But we know that the writing overall was a fair bit of failure in Mass Effect 3. And not just the endings. The endings were pretty bad. But there are a lot of screwed up premises. Things were never explained well. What had begun in the first title was not really ended in the last title. There was a lack of continuity. And so I do want to focus a little bit about that. Now, in brief snippets of conversations, Mac Walters has said something to the effect of the next title of nothing to do with Shepard, okay, and apparently nothing to do with the events of the previous Mass Effect titles. Well, my interpretation of that, and that's only my interpretation, the following is my interpretation, is the following, yes. Well, if he says it has nothing to do with the events of the previous titles, it can't, by definition, be a prequel, because the events of the previous titles were brought about in large measure because of past events. I mean, the Reapers, past civilizations, Protheans, Inasana, etc., etc. So it's not going to be a prequel. Fans didn't want a prequel. It doesn't seem very likely, unless they ignore what the fans wanted. And sequel-wise, it can't have anything to do with the events before, because that's what he's basically said. Nothing to do with Shepard, nothing to do with the sequence of events. It's beginning to sound more and more to me, based on the snippets of information he's released from his mouth, that it is a alternate universe. It's going to be, he said something to the effect of, it's not going to have anything to do with any of the past game, but it's still going to be Mass Effect. How do you accomplish that? The question I have to pose is, if it has nothing to do with the past series, okay, how do you maintain the universe? How do you maintain the Mass Effect universe as we know it? You could make it intergalactic, I suppose, because Mass Effect takes place within one galaxy, but there would still be constants for that universe. There would have to be. If you move from one galaxy within our universe to another, the constants, presumably, to the best of the knowledge of the scientists studying this stuff, they remain the same. It would be really weird if they didn't. Now, they're not very big on science for Mass Effect, really, and they're not really big on being consistent, but still, there needs to be some continuity. As flawed as Dragon Age 2 was, we know that there was some continuity. The plot, badly done though it was, somehow tied into what we knew about the world of Thetis and the conflict between the Templars and the Magus and the problems with magic and the Maker and all that stuff, Darkspawn, etc. There's some continuity there. If you break away from what we've experienced in the past series, you could take a football field and rename it Mass Effect, and it would be just as valid. Now, maybe they're not going to do that. Maybe it'll just be another space opera. But to call something the Mass Effect denotes a certain continuity of spirit, and in this case, the continuity of lore. I mean, it's which they broke in going from Mass Effect 1, 2 to 3, that needs to be intact. We know they surveyed people or asked questions if they want to, as far as playable races are concerned, Asari, Solarian, Turian. So they'll probably still be intact. Will it be in a different galaxy with different rules, different laws, I don't know. It's very cryptic what he said, and it's not very informative, but one can only be left to interpret it as a possible escape clause from the catastrophic abomination of his writing that took place during Mass Effect 3. I don't know. But needless to say, wholly independent of whatever the next title ends up being, and for me, it's in some ways irrelevant because I'll get it, not because of single player, but because of multiplayer. Multiplayer, as I've said many times, was very successful. They made a lot of money through microtransactions. I didn't pay myself for anything, but that is, I just played the game and assembled credits. But I have a feeling they know that, they've recognized that, they see that, they're going to capitalize on it, they're going to invest more time, energy, money, resources, etc. So I'm fairly confident the next multiplayer of Mass Effect will be very good. But even so, I'm a bit worried because one of the reasons why I was always so intrigued by multiplayer and why it became so addictive to me, for me, was the simple fact that there was some tie-in with the lore, roughly speaking. You could play Krogan, you could play Asari. They all had some relationship to what was going on in the universe itself. If you divorce that relationship from or divorce the multiplayer from that relationship, it'll to me it just becomes sort of mindless shooter. Which if it happens, if it comes to that, I'll accept it and I'll move on probably. Well, neither here nor there. But yeah, I'm just left puzzled a bit as to what any of that means. You need continuity. Now you could, of course, set it 10,000 years in the future and say that nobody remembers this stuff. I guess that's one way of doing it. But what are the chances that I hate to say it, a talentless writing hack, and apparently Mac Walters is good guitar player. I can't judge it, but more power to him. A guy who shouldn't be the lead writer of any major Bioware gaming project. Why is he still on the team? Why has he not been at least demoted? Why has he not been fired? I'm not a cruel guy. I don't wish ill upon people, but if you work as a server at a restaurant and you spill drinks in the customers' faces, spit on them, give them an attitude, give them lip. You might be justified in doing it, I don't know, but the point is that you're probably not going to keep your job for very long. You're going to be fired. Why is Mac Walters, after fan reception, fans are the customers, if you will, why was he not fired? I don't understand why he's still there. Why is he still the head leading writer for the Mass Effect series, along with Casey Hudson? Props to him for having a mechanical engineering degree, but the writing, I don't know. Now, I don't know what the basis of this is. Obviously, companies exist to please shareholders, so maybe Mass Effect 3 still did really well, considering multiplayer. I know EA fired their CEO a while back, and EA stocks have gone up as probably and potentially as a consequence. But why is Mac Walters still working for BioWare? Why has he simply not been demoted? Now, let's not forget that there was, as a final note, there was a transition from, say, 1.2.3 to 1.2.3, from primarily 2, but also from 1 to 2, 1.2 to 3, where we lost a bunch of talented people. Christina Norman, lead design on game mechanics for Mass Effect 2, vastly improved the combat system going from 1 to 2. It's not perfect, but it made huge improvements. It was fun, as opposed to just tedious. This is the case of Mass Effect 1. She left, was not participating in Mass Effect 3. There's one. Drew Karpyshyn, who more or less created the Mass Effect universe. It's written some nice novels, Mass Effect Retribution, Revelation, Ascension, and so on and so forth. Interesting stuff, and was a good writer. He left, I think, either before Mass Effect 3 or even at the end of Mass Effect 2. Don't quote me on that. All right. And these were some important people. Jack Wall, I think he left voluntarily, but yeah, he was by far the best composer, at least in my opinion, for Mass Effect. He gave the series some really epic and interesting and captivating music. He moved on, Jack Wall. And, you're kind of left with other people. It's not to say that they're all bad, but those were some of the heavy hitters. Now, I don't want to talk too much about the ending. It's been talked about to death, and check out Smudboy's review of the ending. I think thinking people will appreciate his analyses, but the ending, as far as a while back, it was a little over about a year ago, or maybe a little over a year ago, a guy named Weeks claimed that Casey Hudson, and Mac Walters wrote on the ending without any peer review, without any participation of the others. Well, that shows. It was these comments that he made were then deleted, and it was claimed that it was an imposter who wrote this. Who knows? It seems likely, though, given what happened. And the sheer imperviousness that both Casey Hudson, but in particular Mac Walters, has shown with regards to public opinion on him, meaning lots of people have said, I'm not getting the game if Mac Walters is the head writer, and he is. And, I don't understand why the company hasn't reacted to public opinion, why the fans, despite the outcry, some of it justified, some of it not so much justified, the fact that they invested time, energy, and raised $80,000, and so on and so forth, none of this led to any effect on Mac Walters whatsoever. I have nothing against Mac Walters as a person. I'm sure he's a nice guy. But honestly, since he hasn't shown himself to be a good writer, I ask what his qualifications are. You don't need necessarily to have quote-unquote qualifications to be a writer. I don't believe George R. Martin has amazing qualifications, nonetheless he's a brilliant writer. I've been reading his books since the mid-'90s, before the series ever existed on television. But in the case of Mac Walters, you really have to ask. I know he went to Lakeside University, but that doesn't really tell me a whole lot. Well, now, I'm just left in the dark. I'm left puzzled. I'm left, well, why is he still on the team? Why isn't he being demoted? Why has he not been held accountable for the mess that he created? And since all that's in the past and there's nothing we can do about it, the most relevant question is now, why is he still the head writer for the up-and-coming Mass Effect installment, which, according to his own very cryptic and ambiguous words, will have nothing to do with Shepard and nothing to do with the previous series? That doesn't make any sense to me. No continuity. Call it whatever you want. I guess we can call it Mass Effect. You could also take a shit in a fucking toilet and call it Mass Effect. It has nothing to do with Shepard or the previous series. Continuity, lore continuity. Don't throw it out the window. Why is Mac Walters? So why is Mac Walters still the head writer? This is a legitimate question, lords and ladies. I don't know. I want to understand, because in most business models, if you displease the customers enough, you will get fired. Why is Matt? I mean, is he giving blowjobs to the EA executives? I don't know. I simply don't understand. So if anyone knows or has inside information, or even if it's just well-grounded speculation, do let me know. Why is Mac Walters still the head writer for the Mass Effect series, and why is he even still with Bioware? It's beyond me. The same could loosely be said for Casey Hudson, although I think as a project director, I don't really see the issue there as long as he doesn't write anything. Anyway, leave some comments. I'd be interested in seeing what you have to say about this. I suppose it's controversial, but whatever. Anyway, as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Take care. May the gods watch over you.